It looked like somebody was bent over and had their head in the window of the deer blind, and it either heard me or smelt me, and he pulled his head out of the tent and stood straight up, and that shocked me. They don't make people that big.
The way it moved, almost as if it was gliding across the beach. I've never seen anything move like that in my life. They were screaming at each other in gibberish. It sounded like a language, and they were chuntering away back and forwards, back and forwards, back and forwards. I know what a bear looks like, and there is no way on this planet that what I saw were bears.
What are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
Gia!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
This is Boo Atkins from South Point, Ohio, and you're listening to Sasquatch Chronicles with Wes Germer. Sit back, relax, prop up your feet, and get in the groove with Wes's fresh beats.
Happen?
All right. Well, first, I messed up on that email. It was actually 2006, not 2007, because I had to talk to my dad about it to see if he remembered about it. So I was 11 years old, and we were out at my grandmother's house, which is in southeast Kansas, about 10 miles south of Chanute, Kansas. And we were out there late one night, and of course, being young me, I wanted to go outside play, even though it's dark. About 9 through 10 o'clock-ish, summertime, so it gets dark way late. But I was out messing in the pasture over in the west side, and there's a big block of timber that's further south. I was on probably the very edge of the barn light. That's an old street light that they mounted out there, and I was on the very edge of that light. And I distinctly remember that all the horses have never, ever been outside of that light out that house, especially at night. They've never been outside of the light. And I was sitting there playing on the very edge of the light. And then I started hearing some footfalls out probably 75, maybe 100 yards away from where I was at. Start hearing the footfalls. Now I'm wondering, well, what's that? I didn't think anything of it really at first because I was just out there playing army or something, crawling around through the grass and jumping, making noise. First, I wrote it off. I was like, whatever, maybe a deer walking through the edge of the timber or something like that. And then I kept hearing it, and I heard something. It was just like a large exhale, almost like a horse making a big exhale, and it rattles through its nose, but there was like no rattle at the very end. So just a big. So I stopped, and I was like, what was that? Something that was loudest I've ever heard in my life. Still haven't heard anything that loud. Was screaming at me at the top of its lungs. And it sounded a lot like, well, have you ever seen, I know it's a child's movie, but it's the newer Jungle Book movie.
Yeah.
And it's when the orangutan King Louis, when Christopher Walken's playing him, and he comes out, actually gets up and comes out of the kingdom, and then does the giant roar right at the very beginning. It was like if you were to take that, but at the same exact time have the giant rumble of a alligator throughout the entirety of that roar. I finally found my sense again, so I instantly bolted straight up towards the house. I remember my grandma's mare, who at the time she hated everybody, but the one act of kindness she's ever done, when I started bolting up towards the house, she actually ran out and then got behind me and stayed in between me and the woods as I ran all the way up to the house. I was, of course, freaked out, got up to the house, heaving and hawing because I couldn't breathe because I ran as fast as I possibly could. And my dad meets me basically at the door and has a half step out, and he's like, what was that? And I stuttered to him because I was just in disbelief of what just happened. And I was I don't know. And at the time, of course, I'm 11 years old. I had no idea what could have made that noise. And the fact that he heard it all the way up in the house, as I'm already about 200 yards from the house, and the noise is coming 75 to 100 yards past that, and he heard it while in the house. If that could give any representation to anybody of how loud that was.
And I know this is kind of the first incident that we'll talk of about many different things that have happened on this property. And I find it interesting you take notice that the horses won't leave the light of the corral. They won't go anywhere near the darkness. And, I know you're 11 years old at this time, but what did you think it was? I mean, what did you think was going on?
For me, at first, of course, I thought, oh, deer just moving around through there. And then when it was catching my attention more, it was more like it's heavy. That's what my brain was saying. And I didn't think a person at all because it just sounded too heavy. And that's when it roared back. Never heard anything like it before. It's never heard anything like it since either.
Yeah, you're right. When they vocalize, it's something to be heard. I mean, not only do you hear it, but you feel it. I wanted to ask you about your grandmother's horse before we move on. I mean, that was kind of interesting behavior on the horse's part, getting in between you and this perceived danger. And you were saying the horse was mean?
She was mean as a blazes, never liked people, hated everybody except my grandma, loved her, but hated everybody else. You come near the fence, ears went back, she was chomping at you, always angry. And that was the one time ever in my life she's been somewhat nice to me. Ran up behind and actually chauffeured me all the way up to the light. It was very odd, especially for her.
Yeah, and I want to talk about what happened in 2015. And, here we are in 2006, and this is kind of the first weird thing that happened. But before we talk about the incident in 2015, from 2006 to 2015, was there anything else odd or strange that happened?
To my knowledge, no. We never lost any animals or anything weird. Like, it was all very common, but all the animals were always up by the light, up by that barn. So, as I've heard on your show for a long time, you put out a big light or a fake camera, they don't show up. And that light pole was there well before we moved. My grandmother moved out there, and it might have been for a reason, because there used to be a older milk barn that was further south of the house, and the house was out there too with the milk barn. And it, as soon as that family moved back in, like, I think it was 1867, when that family moved from that milk barn area, the people that moved in next demolished it and moved the house up further away from it. For a long time, it was just cropland before that.
Yeah, it makes you wonder why they moved the house further away from that barn. Take me back to 2015. I know this happened in August. What were you doing and what happened?
Well, it was directly after I got out of my college classes, and I got out round 3. Then I would go home, get some form of like snack or lunch, and then I would head out and check my trail cameras for the upcoming deer season, because deer season starts in September here in Kansas. So I'm going out there, and right before I'm walking in the timber, I check my phone, my little flip phone I had at the time. Flipped it open, saw 345. I was like, cool, like perfect timing. Most of the deer aren't in the area. I've rarely ever got pictures at that time. So I start walking into the timber, and I get in there probably 125 yards, which is, I'm starting to veer off to the west to go down through a creek bed to go over to my trail cam. But I stop because I need to urinate. So I stop, and then I just kind of step behind this bigger tree, because I try to keep, whenever I do have to use it, I try to keep it towards the base of a tree, so it's not just spreading out across the trail or anything like that. So I start going, and then I hear a big crack, which I've heard trees falling in the woods before, which I first thought, oh, trees falling. Then I hear another big crack, creaking. Then a big crack again, and a snap. Now I'm like, wait, I'm just standing there. I'm waiting. I'm expecting to hear a bunch of branches hitting and dragging down, and then smacking the ground like normal tree fall in the woods. And there was just a bigger pause. And I instantly thought, that's really, and then before I even got weird, I heard the big thud. And I'm like, what was that? I was confused, but it's 2015, so I'm 19. Well, 19. Yeah, I was 19. So I was like, oh, well, I'm fine. Bulletproof. Doesn't matter. So I get back out from behind the tree, get back on the trail, and I start walking towards the creek bed. Cross through the creek bed. I'm walking still at the diagonal towards the west. And then I see it. There's a sycamore tree shoved upside down in the ground. I don't know exactly what could do that other than Sasquatch. And that was my exact thought when I was walking up to it. And I was like, how in the heck was something this strong? Because sycamores they're a stout tree. One of the strongest that's around here that isn't used for like bow wood or burning. So I'm walking up to it, and I'm like, that's actually really high off the ground to get broke too, because it's about hip high on me. I'm 6 foot tall with, like, for my pants, I got a 32-inch inseam. But at the top of my hip, where my waistline is, it's sitting right at 36 and a half inches. And that's without my boots on. So this tree was broke off at about 3 foot off the ground. then picked up and slammed back into the ground upside down. And this is like a 6-inch diameter tree. Personally, don't think I could ever do that. Even with a truck, you're probably going to stop it. But something broke it off at 3 foot from the ground and then has the gusto to hop up taller than this tree and then shove it in the ground upside down. Because it didn't have the top broke off. It was literally flipped up upside down and shoved right back into the ground. It's extremely impressive. Whatever did it, it got me. I was impressed. A little scared, but impressed. So I was like, well, I'm here. I gotta get this done. So I went off and I got my trail cam. I just took it off the tree. I wasn't even going to linger and try to take out the chip and then go with that. I took the whole trail cam down. And when I turned around, I noticed that you couldn't, from the line of the trail cam, you couldn't see that tree, at all. You could not see it. It was right out of line of it. But it was on the same path for coming into that trail cam. So whatever did it needed to stay unseen by at least a camera lens. So it had to be smart. So that's not just some random, I guess, giant bull out there or something like that messing around. Not that you couldn't tell if that was a bull out there messing around. Something with a good amount of intelligence.
Yeah, it is impressive, especially since it didn't do it in front of the game cam. And I've come across something like that before. And I don't know, it could have been Sasquatch. It was a weird situation where it didn't turn it upside down and put it back down in the ground. But I remember seeing a tree that was obviously yanked out of the ground. And it was in an area where you couldn't really get equipment down there, but it was yanked out of the ground and just kind of tossed off to the side. But the upside down tree thing, I've had other eyewitnesses report that, and you can even go to Google and type in, upside down tree or tree put back in the ground, and they'll show you images of it. And, if someone's, in this situation, obviously no one's doing it with equipment, but even if you had equipment, that makes no sense to even do that. At this point, do you see anything or do you smell anything?
I didn't smell anything until I was starting to head back. When I was heading back, I kind of veered off a little bit because I kind of steered clear of the tree because I was like, something made a display and it's clearly it doesn't want me here. So I kind of steered around it further, went around some brambles and then around a rose bush. And right after I got out past the rose bush, that's when I smelled something. And it was literally like that black pond mud or lake mud, either way, just that dark black mud that smells a lot like sulfury manure and leaf dander stuff just rotting, mixed with a skunk that was dipped into it. And it was pungent, but it's not like a skunk where your eyes are going to water if it's that close. But you could smell it it was almost like it was right there. And that's when hair on the back of my neck stood up and I was like, I have to go. So I picked up my pace a little bit. I didn't quite run, but I picked up my pace and got out of there. Went back through the creek bed, up and straight out. I went right down the trail, no stops, no looking, no nothing. I left.
Yeah, it's scary when you see something like that. And I know eventually you see the creature, but you haven't seen it yet. But you're seeing this and you realize how powerful they are. And it was probably a good idea to get out of there. I wonder sometimes in these situations, and I know that you don't know and I don't know, but do you think it knew you were there?
Absolutely had to know I was there because nothing like animal wise or human wise goes, hey, I'm going to do this just because. They do it because there's something else that they're like, hey, I need to show that, hey, I got the power. You're not going to step over this. And that's what it was like. It was like a very big dominance display. That's how I perceived it anyway.
Yeah, I agree with you. Because there's really no reason for it to do that. It's not like it serves any other purpose than, like you said, a display to show you who's running the show. Tell me, when did the next incident happen, and walk me into it if you would.
Oh, I think that may have been the very next year because it was around the same time, really. Me and my little brother, we went out fishing to Grandma's farm ponds all the time. This is all happening in basically the same exact area. But me and him went out fishing all the time. We started out at the front pond, and then we crossed over the levee, having a good day. We were catching a pretty good amount of fish. Pond was a little low because it's dry. We didn't get rain. And then we wrapped around the back pond and we parked the truck, and we both kind of split up and we conquered the pond together. Find wherever they're hitting the best, and then we both kind of veer together and fish out that spot. Catch release mostly. We were just talking a little bit, saying, hey, yeah, we got a hit over here or hit over there, using spinners at the time. Not even saying a word. We were just sitting there. We were reeling in. We were both just cast. We were reeling in. And we hear all the just a crazy ruckus of something almost like flying through the air. And we were like, what is that? Like, we both kind of look off, and we're like, what's that? And then this rock that's 15, maybe 20 pounds, because it's large rock, just busting out of the trees at like 30 feet up in those trees. And right on the other side of those trees, opposite of us, that there's a creek bed. The creek bed actually circles back right over there, and it goes straight down 12 feet. And then it comes back up and goes onto a little plateau, and then goes back off through the timber, and then eventually into a crop field after about 300 yards. But this rock comes busting out of the trees, and we both just watch it sail through the air and then land past where we were into about the center of the pond for the back pond. And just badoosh, giant rock hitting the water. Then we both look up at each other, and we both look back at the woods. And I told it, like, I instantly start picking up my pace, reeling in my pole, and I was like, time to go. And he was like, what was that? And I was like, doesn't matter. And we kept I walked back around the pond because he was closer to the truck than I was. And he's just kind of like cast again, keeps going. I get over to the truck, and I'm putting up all my stuff. And I'm getting it squared away, put up. I'm like, hey, we got to go. And he was just, of course, nonchalant, walking over slow. And he was like, I don't understand why we got to. Then he saw my face. And I had probably the most stern look I've probably ever given him in his life. I said, it's time to go. Pack up. We have to leave. And that's when he knew I was extremely serious about the situation. And there was no if, and, or but. We got to go. So as soon as I got him talked out of that, he got his stuff put up, hopped in the truck, go. Didn't even look back, nothing. Didn't say a word about it. We actually didn't talk about it again until recently, which was about, I think a month after my most recent encounter. We actually started talking about it because I had the encounter, and then I talked to him about it because I was just like, well, you're the only one that kind of knows what I'm possibly dealing with, and you've had some form of experience.
Yeah, I think it's really cool that you're taking your brother out there fishing, and you hear this behavior time and time again. It's weird. They never throw boulders at hunters, but they always do it to fishermen. I know that your dad's not really an outdoorsman, but Did you ever sit him down and talk to him about what's been going on, this weird stuff? I guess it's kind of hard to explain because you haven't seen anything yet, but I mean, it's kind of alarming, that these things are going on. And did you get a chance to ever sit down and have that chat with your dad?
Not really. Like, he's like, everything that's on the world is on the world. That's just how it is. He's not really into hunting and fishing or a lot of outdoors stuff. He kind of grew up when he was really little. He had to do that just to kind of sustain life. And now he doesn't really have any want to do it because it's not fun because he used to have to do it. So we haven't really talked about the stuff that has went on or the weird things. I mean, my grandma's always said it's the swamp monster that lives out there. Stay away from the pond during this time of year. The swamp monster's out there. She's always just said it, and I mean, we've always blown it off like, yeah, okay. And then after those occurrences, it's like, well, maybe at some point she saw something. I've asked before, like, hey, have you ever seen anything weird or heard anything? And she's like, nope, never have.
Yeah, it's very strange your grandmother would make that comment and then say she never saw anything. I mean, it's just kind of weird. Like, why, don't go around this area at a certain time because the swamp monster will get you. It makes you wonder what she meant by that. I mean, and then for her to say, well, I've never seen it, it's bizarre. From 2015 until the incident in January of 2023, did you ever start investigating and going around? I know you're out there hunting and stuff, but did you ever go out there and see if you could ever find any evidence or find out what is going on?
Well, I mean, on the weird noises, I mean, there was something that I found it odd. I actually talked about it to a friend at work just the other day because we were talking about weird things that happened in the woods. And I was like, well, the weirdest thing, just for weird, not like, what the hell was that? But I used to walk around in the woods or close to the woods or around the pond. And I would make a sound with my lips. I'd just be walking around and I would be, people call it like the cartoon octopus walking or whatever. It goes like you're just rattling your lips together. And I was walking in the woods one day. I was over by the country road, which had a bridge going across the creek. And I was walking in and going towards that side. And then I heard something in the water. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll get to see some deer walk out. That'd be cool. So I kind of crouched down and I'm like, trying to get a little bit closer. And I hear it moving through the water. And it's been raining for a while. So there's like 2 foot of water in there. I'm like, oh, normally something like a deer would have hopped out of there by now. Would have got right out on one of the banks and climbed out. But then it just like, it keeps slosh. And that's when I'm noticing it sounds like 2 legs. Like whenever I've waded through water about knee deep for me. But I mean, for 2 foot deep, that would be above my knees. And it's just walking through like nothing. It was just consistent slosh. And then I start hearing the same thing that I do all the time whenever I'm walking around. While sloshing through the water down in the creek bed and walking through. And I'm getting goosebumps and hair standing up now just thinking about it, talking about it. But then I was like, what is that? Because typically whenever I'm making those little noises and stuff, no one's around me out there. I'm just making noise because I'm thinking in my head or something. And then I'm like, well, I'm going to try to see what this is. And I'm kind of paralleling it, being as quiet as I possibly can because it's making a ruckus walking through that water. So it probably can't even hear me up top. And there's no way it could see me because I was too far away from the edge. And I was trying to catch up to it and then get on an angle so I could see because there's an opening in the creek. And I was And I tried to look up through there, and all I saw was a slight flash, which I thought still at the time, even though I've already thought that's on two legs, I thought maybe a bird or a deer, or maybe it is a deer that's still walking down the creek. And I just saw a flash of kind of auburn light hair. I was like, well, crap, I didn't see it. So I started trying to circle around, and there's a really large bullbriar and wild riverbank grape spot that just mounds up in this one spot on the edge of the creek bed. Pretty sure it's on an old fallen dead walnut tree or something like that, and I can't even see through it. But as soon as I get around to try to look around that, I'm not moving fast enough, and I hear something slosh, big slosh, and then just kind of like running, streaking water, like running off of a long-haired dog, and then it's silent. And when I finally get all the way around and can see, I don't see anything, but all I can see is up the bank, about where we had that rock thrown at us, about at that bank, on the plateau across from it. The bank over there is about 10 foot tall, and there's a step, like a wet step, that was on a tree root. That's probably about the size of my thigh, that was coming out through the creek bed and going back in. There's a step of water, like a wet step, that was there, and then you could tell where something grabbed around the edge of a tree because broke the bark back, and then it's like it swung its other leg up and then just went. But I never truly saw what it was, so I kind of wrote it off.
Yeah, it's frustrating when you're just catching glimpses of something. It's kind of weird too. It was mimicking, when you're out there in the woods, you're just making noises to yourself, how it had caught onto that and mimicked what you were doing. And, most encounters, when people have these things on their property or they're passing through at certain times of the year, much like you, they'll describe a lot of really weird things that happen over and over and over. And then they eventually see the creature. And that's kind of what happened in your situation. Take me back almost a year ago. This is January of 2023. And this is where you actually see it. What were you doing and what happened?
Well, I was headed on 7 Highway. I just turned off on it. I was going to work. And I got to be at work ready to start by 6 a.m. And I live almost an hour away. So I leave super early just in case I blow a tire or something crazy and I got to fix it. So I was actually just hitting 7 Highway, and I was headed down it. I looked down at my clock on my dash, and I'm like, okay, 4:42. And then I look back up because it's just a quick glance. I look down and then I look back up, and I catch movement, and it's further out, but I'm driving 60 miles per hour down this road. I see movement, and I'm like, what is that? And it's like right on the edge of the road, on the right hand side of the road for me, coming to the left. And it just stepped out of the ditch. And I'm like, what is that? And then it takes 2 steps, and it's across half the road. And by that time, I'm like right there. I can see it now. I'm like, and I instantly, what in the F is that? And when I'm saying that, it looks over at the truck and then kind of raises up its left arm like, oh crap, because it got caught in the light, and it's like, oh crap. And then it speeds up and takes a big right step and then a big left steps right over the edge of the road, edge of gravel and grass where that starts on the ditch. Steps there and then jumps across this ditch. And it's like nothing. Like it just almost like it flicked its ankle and it flew over to the other side. Landed on both of its feet, planted, and then stood right back up and started running into this. It's a tall, thorny plant, and it's called teasel. Looks kind of like a pine cone on top, but it's closer to a thistle. It starts running through this, and it's tall because it's been overgrown, and it used to be, that whole area used to be trees, but they blew it down right after I moved up this way. But it starts running through this teasel, and I notice it lifts both of its arms up above the teasel and then is running through it, which would tear up just about anybody because it may as well be running through a thicket of roses or a bunch of bullbriar. And it's hightailing it off. And I let off the gas after I truly saw it. And I watched it jump and run and start running. And I'm just watching it just disappear into the dark at a rate of speed that is truly unfathomable for a human to ever do. I'm still driving. I got to go to work. So I watched all this happen, and it's running towards this wood line, disappears into the night. And I just sit there. I'm kind of beside myself. I'm still kind of slowing down. And then my brain catches up. Hey, you got to go to work. So I apply the gas again, and I'm like, well, I guess go on my merry way. And what the hell was that? So I just go, and I head into work, do my normal routine in the morning, a little bit quieter than normal because I'm literally trying to figure out what the hell this is. And buddy that I work with, he's on my crew, he comes in and he instantly, what's going on with you? Drops his lunch pail and just standing there. And I was like, saw something this morning. He's like, hey, I was like, go clock in and then I'll talk to you about it. He goes and clocks in, comes back over. He's like, what do you think you saw? And I was like, I'm really confused by this. I was like, what has really large glowing red eyes whenever you hit it with light? And he was like, oh, only thing I really know of is a cat, maybe a coon, but you said large eyes, so I'd assume you probably saw a cat. And I was like, all right, now, you know the road signs and on that show mile markers or culvert markers? And he was like, yeah. I was like, put those eyes 1.5 foot taller than that. He stopped and he was like, I don't know what the hell you saw. It's the only thing that could be like that. He was like, I mean, I don't believe it, but Bigfoot. And I was like, yeah, that's what I was thinking. But I mean, I feel crazy, man. And he was like, man, you've never lied to me before. Why would you lie now? Especially about something that you got detail about. He was like, what color is it? And I was like, it was a dark walnut brown. I was like, not black, walnut brown. About 4-inch hair over most of its body, 6-inch on its arms, and probably around the back of where its head was. He's like, what was it? Did it go on all fours? And I was like, no, bipedal, like it was on its feet and it ran. When I first saw it, if I was to guess, I was probably 75, 80 yards away when I very first saw it. So I'm not very far at first. Now I'm coming at it at 60 miles per hour. Then by the time it crosses to about halfway in the road, I'm probably at 30 yards. And when it goes, oh crap, and starts speeding up and jumps across, by the time it jumps across, I'm like right beside it. So I'm watching it jump, land, and while it's landing, I'm watching it in my side mirror. Well, not my side mirror, my side window. So right beside me, I'm looking right out the cab at it as it lands and then runs into the brush.
Yeah, and I bet in that moment you were thinking back to all the weird things that had happened, and now you're seeing it. You'd mentioned the glowing red eyes, and I realize your headlights are on. You're basically right there. Do you think what you saw was eye shine, or do you think they were actually glowing?
I think it was eye shine just by how it reflected back. And it wasn't like it stayed the glowing eyes, and it wasn't happening before. When I first saw it, it was like it looked directly at me, and then I instantly got the glow because I shine.
I got you. Well, I want to ask you, when you're really close to this thing as you're approaching it, and now you're relatively close, and the headlights, it kind of turns and looks at you, and then it puts up its arms to obviously block the light. What you were looking at, was there anything human about it?
For me, I thought it looked like an older picture I've seen of what they thought Heidelbergensis would look like. Like Homo heidelbergensis looked like that, like almost exactly like that, just add hair. So it had more like mustache, more a bald chin, and then turned back into like kind of like a beard, and then just hair that ran everywhere. And then around the high point of the cheekbone, wrapping up to top of our forehead, and I distinctly remember the hair pointed down towards its nose at the top of that. But it was all bald there, no hair. It wasn't quite like leathery skin, but it wasn't like human skin. It looked like it had more density to it, like it was tougher, but it wasn't quite like it was leathery. The skin tone was, from what I could see, it was like a muddled gray brown, almost like half set clay, but not so pale.
So you aren't seeing like a non-human primate, like a great ape or something like that. You're seeing something more like a caveman.
Kind of like a caveman, but like for most people, like you hear caveman, you're going to think of Homo neanderthalis, shorter, stocky, really broad. But this was like a supersized Heidelbergensis, which is what they've said. And from the fossil record stuff, it looks more human like build wise. But this one was like it's supersized, covered in hair, and decently proportionate to a human. I wouldn't say it's misproportioned.
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating. I think out of all the reports I've taken from Kansas, and you'll find this sometimes in places around Kansas to where a lot of eyewitnesses will say it didn't look like a gorilla. It looked more like a human.
Makes a lot of sense to me for it to be more like a hominin or human, because you're in the Great Plains. Even though you're on the edge of it over here on the eastern side of Kansas and you got more trees and woodland, there's a lot of open areas where it's just grassland. It's a little bit better to have a longer shin bone to step through that. If you were to have a shorter one, it's going to be harder to step through. You're going to be catching on everything worse because the hinge point's different.
What amazes me is, you talked about it going through that brush like it was nothing. And you hear that time and time again. Like, I've heard of them going through sticker bushes. There's no way any human could go through it, and they'll just kind of mow through it. I know you kind of alluded to the height earlier with the sign, and you're in your truck at this time kind of looking up at this thing. How tall do you think it was?
Well, I went back because I was quite bothered that day by what I saw. I went back to the location. Then I had tape measure in my truck, went straight back to the location. I stopped there. First thing I was looking for was if there was any tracks. Even it started raining later on that day, but I still was like, it was heavy. It had to be. It was huge. I felt small looking at this thing, and I'm 250 pounds and 6 foot tall, and I felt small, like I was nothing compared to this thing. So I was like, it's got to leave a track. Even if it stepped on this gravel, it's got to. I found a track and then where it landed. So I was able to measure the distance it actually jumped. But first I found that track. I tried to get a picture of it, but it was just like for my phone to catch the actual angles and the depression, it just didn't even look like anything was there. Like, I tried circling it, like everything I possibly could. If I had casting material, I would have tried to cast it, but it was a depression that was, I would say, 3.5 inches deep, where the ball of the foot would have hit for wherever it pushed off. And the full length of the track was 16 inches. So where the heel hit, and then where you could see the ball of the foot pushed in and the toes angled out and pressed off, from that point to the end, it was 16 inches. So at flat footed, I would say it was probably 17.5, just by the angles that it had. That's how big that track was. If I was to reckon it being sat flat footed on something, it would probably be 17.5 inches, just by how the angles of the track were sitting and it was depressed. I put my tape measure right there so I didn't lose that spot. Now I go over to what's actually a culvert sign. I keep saying that it's a mile marker sign, but it's a culvert sign. I go stand right beside it. And I'm looking at it. I'm like, I reach up and I touch, see how tall it is off of me. Then I measure it out with my hand real quick, and I walk back over to the tape and stand there. I measure out. I'm like, 6 inches taller than I am, and that ends right towards the edge of the road. So if the sign is 6'6", and when it looked directly at me, it was 1.5 feet taller. So just its eyes had to be sitting right at 6.5 plus the 1.5 feet. So it's sitting at 8 foot tall with just the eyes, not the top of its head, because whenever it looked at me, it's like it bucked its head back to look more down at me than at me, because the bright light. So its eyes are sitting at 8 foot tall. If I was to guess, it would probably, for the top of its head, be about 8'5" to 8'8" at its max height.
Yeah, that thing is huge, man. I was curious, after all these weird things that happened, and prior you kind of got a glimpse of something, but now you're actually seeing what's on the property. Did you ever think twice, like, maybe I shouldn't be out running around on this property? I mean, I realize it's home, but did that ever cross your mind?
Absolutely not. I'm not going to give up what I've already done. I love the wilderness too much. I love being outside. It's like, yeah, it was scary. It's not something I would exactly want to be on foot around, but clearly I've been around it a lot. As long as I'm looking at it, as long as I take the sign of, hey, leave, and I leave, then I should be okay.
Yeah, I hear ya, and I can appreciate the way you feel. Do you think that they're hanging out on this property all the time, or do you think that they're actually just passing through at certain times of the year?
I believe they pass through there at certain times of the year, because the only times that I've ever had anything happen is basically right before deer season, and that's just on the property. It's like around us, everybody, it's older farmer folk. They don't bring up anything that weird that's happened. If it's happened, nothing. To them, nothing happened. Oh, I just lost this calf or this cow or whatever, just because it just disappeared, ran off, and then never came back. So I think they're just passing through, because there's not really a lot there at my grandmother's property for them to go for, other than the fish in the pond, because that's the time of year that the pond will be the lowest. So it'd be easier for them to wade out and grab them.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's because there's a lack of like major cover in Kansas, but I can't say that I've ever interviewed someone from Kansas that was like, oh yeah, they're here on the property all the time. Almost everyone I talk to says they're passing through, or it's only certain times of the year that they actually will have encounters or things happen. You got a really good look at this thing. And I ask everyone on the show, what do you think Sasquatch is? And there's no wrong answer because no one knows, but what are your thoughts? What do you think this thing is?
I believe it's natural. It doesn't seem like it's out of this world. I think it's some form of hominid because it had the same structure as a hominid we already know. And we're showing up more and more that, like, I think, what was it, 2 million years ago, there was 7 known hominid demographics. Like, there was different types of human. 7 of them all at once. Not like, oh, there's a bunch of different ethnicities. It's like, no, there's 7 different types. Who says one of them hasn't just made it? If it's smart enough to avoid us for this long and stay alive, well, then why wouldn't it kind of keep doing so and be able to hide? It can deal with super cold weather. I mean, the one I saw in January, it's not exactly 85 and sunny. I think it was like 16 degrees that day, walking around.
Yeah, it's insane. You'll hear many accounts of them out in weather that really don't make any sense. I just posted on the blog, a listener had sent me these tracks that he had found, and it looks like a human footprint walking. He's in a couple of feet of snow, and you can see where this thing stomped down the snow, and it's walking. And you think, I wouldn't even want to be out there with my boots on and in full gear when it's like 16 degrees. I can't imagine walking out with a bare footprint. And I understand the way you feel with regard to what Sasquatch is, because if I saw what you saw, I'd probably be on the same page as you. But it's so fascinating to me when you hear of these different looking ones where, sometimes people will say, no, this thing looked like a gorilla. Everyone kind of describes it knows the same way, but they'll say, no, what I saw was very much like a gorilla. And then there's other times where people are like, no, what I saw was very human. And it makes you wonder how they survived the cold. And I know we're kind of coming up on this time of year. I know it's still your grandmother's property and you live just north of there, but I know that you continue to go back there. I would like to know if anything else happens on that property. And I really appreciate you taking the time to share it. A lot of accounts start off like this where, okay, this weird thing happened and this weird thing happened. And eventually people will see what it is. And keep me up to date, man. I really enjoyed having you on, Kyle. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Oh, no problem.
And that's it for tonight, everyone. Remember, if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. And if you get a chance, check out sasquatchchronicles.com. You can become a member and get additional shows. Have a great weekend, and until next time, everyone.